Hello, and welcome to Coffee Time. Coffee Time is a space where magical humans come together for some real talk, strong coffee, and powerful introspections on whatever is top of mind right now. My name is Natalie, and I am your host for this channel and today's super exciting conversation. The idea behind Coffee Time is that you are in your favorite coffee shop, maybe cozied up with a book, and you begin to listen in on an intriguing conversation between folks at the next table over. For that reason, there is no big introduction. We absolutely let the conversation speak for itself. And if you do want to know more about these special guests following today's episode, I invite you to check out the show notes for more details. So, on that note, let's dive right in. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am good. I actually had, on the topic of related to kind of what we're diving into, a couple like good nights sleep back to
Nice.
back. And I'm like back to sleeping in my bed. I'd been on the couch for a month and a half, and
Yeah.
like my blood sugar was like more or less good. What was I gonna say? Like behaving. I don't know. There's a better word for that, but you know that. So that's always a plus as well.
Like regulated instead of like the super highs and lows.
Yeah, and sometimes those things just happen and you can't, you could do everything right and it happens.
Yeah.
I'm actually starting on a pump in a couple of weeks, so I'm excited for that because sometimes it's just that I can't, like, I know it's going to go a certain way, but I don't want to wake up every 2 hours through the night to do what I know I need to do. But now the pump will be able to do that for me. So
Oh, that's awesome. So you don't have to like wake up and like, oh,
yeah, because like there are certain things where like if I eat a certain food late, especially like later at night, like after 7 p.m., right?
yeah.
I know that I will need to take my insulin every, say, 2 hours over the course of 6 to 8 hours versus taking it all up front, which maybe I could get away with during the day, just because of how it metabolizes and how the like food metabolizes. But with the pump, I can set it up to release it over a certain period of time. And since I
Yeah.
already know how that factors in for myself, I think once I learn how to program it, it'll just simplify it a lot. Yeah, so I think people use them for different reasons. Some people, it's like they don't know how to do the math, and so the pump makes it more accessible. For
Yeah.
me, it's a bit more of like I've been doing it all myself, but I shouldn't have to. So this just makes it a bit easier and safer when living alone too. So
Yeah. And then you know, like you said, it's a metered dose and yeah.
exactly. So yeah, so I'm excited. That's my like big exciting thing for the week. But
Nice.
yeah.
But because there's Jessica Butner or something. She's a like a globally ranked Canadian powerlifter,
Oh wow.
and she's type 1.
I feel like I have followed
And
her on Instagram or something before. Yeah.
you must, she's like, but she just did a big talk about her journey with it and her pump and stuff like that. So it
I'll
just
have to
made me
check that
think of
out.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's because she's like an elite level strength athlete as well on top of it. And she was like, oh, I don't talk about this because I figure everyone just knows. She's like, but she got into like the ups and the downs and how it affects everything. And it's
Oh,
like,
it does. It really does. That's I think something for myself at least that I am in the process of unpacking more, like any health diagnosis or these things that, come into our lives and we're like, "Oh, wait a second," is really letting yourself sit with the impact of it cuz
yeah,
and I think it's in the moment, sometimes you just have to triage the situation so you don't get to process it. And then that's when it becomes trauma that you're dealing with 2 decades later, or a decade in this case, because I've been diabetic for about 8 years, I think, since I was diagnosed. But
okay,
yeah, yeah. And then related to that, actually, I was thinking because of like seeing everything in your group on Facebook talking about food and growing up and all of that. And like recently
yeah,
for me, I went through an uncoupling, which has been a lot to process. And the first thing I noticed, though, especially with, feeling all the emotions, and I feel it for me very much in my stomach.
yeah,
And that really triggered old behaviors where, because I've had disordered eating history, um, and I would not eat. And then my stomach would hurt. And I would use that as a cue that, oh, well, I can't eat because my stomach hurts. And so I kind of conditioned myself, though, to use that feedback to continue these like unsupportive habits that I had formed for myself.
Yeah.
And so I noticed as soon as that started, I instantly got that thought of, well, I can't eat. And so it was it was interesting to observe, one, how quickly that could come back. But then I think now with where I'm at on the flip side, it was also really quick to be able to say, okay, well, and like for me, I cut out coffee and I focused on eating something during the times where I felt like I could, whatever, just minimal amounts, and sleeping. So that's why I was like, you know what, if I can only sleep on my couch with the TV on, I'm going to do that, because those are the baseline things that I need to maintain in my life right now. And for me, like not drinking was another big one. But it's just, it's interesting, I think, to see how quickly those old habits and that conditioning can come back, even though I feel fairly far removed from it. I don't know if that resonates for you. I know a lot of what you talk about kind of relates to that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, definitely. Like for me, it's like I've had recent struggles with like, and it's weird because it's like, it feels like it's coming from food insecurity, but it's like, so I get paid because I do technical sales Monday to Friday, and I get paid quarterly bonuses. So like my quarterly bonus is coming, and I've noticed this trend where as it's coming, I'm starting to spend like the last of my savings on food. So I'm ordering out like every night, and I don't need to. It doesn't support my goals. Like, but it's like this, oh, the money's coming, so I got to spend more so that I can have more food. And I don't know if it like comes from living in my car and not eating every 3 days. And because I've had different times in my life where food hasn't been available. I haven't had money for food, and I had to rely on the kindness of strangers to eat. So, and then childhood, never really knowing what we were going to have, and that whole finish your plate, whatever's there.
Yep.
It's been interesting because the last like couple weeks has been back and forth. So I get, like, it's just weird how stuff comes up after. You're like, oh no, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. And then something happens. You're like, oh, just kidding.
Yeah. So what is that? I guess that, because I kind of shared a bit about like my process of observation, like what has that process been for you of kind of recognizing like, oh, this is an old pattern to do with this upbringing, and like how have you been kind of working, I don't want to say like fixing it, because I don't think there is that. I think we just move through it moment to moment, right? So like what does that process look like for you?
For me, it's been like putting a bunch of stuff on my skip order and then like deleting it. And even if I order it, I order less. So instead of ordering enough for 10 people, I might order enough for 3.
Okay.
So it's a process. I'm like, wait, Arthur, that's way too much food. You do not need to buy all this food. Like, that's ridiculous. Pick something more like single sitting size if you absolutely need to order out, instead of ordering enough for a family of 6.
Right. That's
so just like realizing like, okay, no, looking over my cart, that's way too much food, man. Like,
so is it like for you, because it sounds like it comes from, I think, that programming of not having it. So when it is accessible, feeling like you need to get all of it. And does that element, like what's coming up for me, like that element of fear that it won't be there, still come up?
I'm not conscious to it. I think it's totally there. I think it really is, but it's not like, oh my God, I'm so scared I'm not going to have food, not consciously. So I've been trying to like think around that, and the mindfulness of like reviewing what I'm actually putting on instead of being surprised by all this food has helped.
No, I get that one too. I do my like grocery pickup order, and I always set a reminder to go in the night before and like review everything so I can cross-reference with what is in my fridge and then kind of go from there. And also though, there's certain, like for me at least, there's certain staples that I always have in that order, because they're like the snack foods or the whatever that I like to have on hand. And for me, it's easier to keep that fairly consistent than to change it up. Also because of blood sugar reasons, like I need to be able to factor that in. But I kind of have set things. Like if I'm ordering food out, I really like to get Indian food from this place nearby. I'll always get like the same 4 items. And then there's leftover sauce from one that I can make 2 more meals with it and kind of like do that. So I have like that kind of system, because I'm definitely someone, and I don't know if this relates, but like if I go on a vacation, probably the main souvenir I am buying is food, like especially in the States, because they have so many more of the like gluten-free specialty items readily available in grocery stores. So
Yeah.
like for me, that is exciting because to go when you have like food restrictions for like health reasons, especially to go somewhere where you actually feel like you can eat everything without some horrible negative consequence that you have to factor into that decision.
Yeah.
Like that's something a lot of people I think take for granted. And so that for me is exciting. So I'll go and like majority, like I got, when I went to San Francisco, I think I bought like a t-shirt and the rest of my things I bought were food.
So like different, like what's one of your favorite ones? Is there one that you always want to try to grab when you're in the US?
That's a good question. I buy so many things. Um, for a while we didn't have them as accessible in Canada. And there's these like smash mallows. They're like, I think they're technically paleo friendly marshmallows, and or they're at least like gluten free and like close to that end of the spectrum. And
Yeah.
they're really good, and they have different flavors. And usually they have them in the airport, so I'd like pick up a bag on my way home. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I've seen different like paleo type
Yeah.
ones, but I don't know if I've seen those. At first, because you said squishmallows, there's squishmallows. I've got like these stuffies.
Yeah, I've seen those too. Oh my God.
And I got one, and then Sarah's kids really loved them. So now each of their birthdays, I get them one.
Oh, that's so funny.
And now they get their own little personal ones, right? So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, squishmallows, they're soft and they're cuddly.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, these are marshmallows, but they're also soft. But yeah, that's been like my treat, because especially when I started going, because for me, my dietary journey of like trying to eat more healthfully and like listening to my body, which takes time, started with my MS diagnosis. And so I cut out gluten, and then I cut out legumes, dairy, corn, and like on it went. And when you can't eat corn or like corn syrup, that limits a lot of these treats you can get. And like, that's fine. But sometimes you just want the marshmallow without the negative impacts. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the corn sensitivity, or is it like full blown allergy sensitivity, or?
There's a couple different things to that for me. So originally, part of it was really just eliminating pro-inflammatory foods. And so even if I didn't necessarily notice a physical response, I was eliminating all of them. So I was like strict paleo for 2 years or so, I think.
Great.
Honestly, once I adjusted to it, it was fine. I was making my food fresh every day. I didn't mind it. I had friends who would come cook instead of going out. And like, I really enjoyed that part. I think because at the time I was living a schedule that allowed for me to do like daily cooking and be creative with that thing and, whatever. Yeah. Now having tried it, it just, I don't think I have a desire to put that amount of focus into my meal prep, if that makes sense. Whereas at the time I did.
There's more planning.
A lot. Yeah. And sometimes I just want the frozen pizza. So it started out as like eliminating pro-inflammatory foods. And I did that a lot. And then in time, and this is what was interesting, I've actually talked to someone about this before. Maybe you'll have some kind of response to this piece. But for me, it was actually going super restrictive with my eating that allowed me to then become a bit more intuitive with how I eat. And so by restricting everything, I then was able to, in time, try things out gradually and figure out the response I got. And so now it's at a point where, like, with things like corn, my body doesn't love it, but in small amounts, like, I'm okay. So on occasion, and when I say occasion, I mean like maybe once every 4 to 5 months, I might get like Mexican food, but it's very minimal like the frequency is low. But there's other things that I will never eat, like soy, and gluten is another one, but for different reasons now than it was before. So it's kind of allowed me to feel into that a bit more and like understand how my body responds. But then I think at the end of the day too, it's like making that informed decision for myself. Because it's always, what do people say? This one time I heard this, there's no such thing as cheating, because to cheat is to gain an unfair advantage. And really, when I eat those foods, what I'm doing is making an informed decision that the potential negative consequences are worth it in that moment for me. That's not a cheat. And I think that was a really important thing for me to differentiate.
Oh, totally. And for the cheating thing, like, I shared that bit on the live the other day in the group. And so when I was super strict, like paleo, I went like Cheeto paleo too, right? Like as strict as I could be, like no sweet potatoes, no starches, nothing.
I did that for a bit too.
It was interesting, and I got a couple things out of it. One was kind of like you were saying, like the better for feeling out your body. Because what I realized doing the super strict paleo is because I cut out all the dairy, right? If I wanted cheese, it was goat cheese. That was it. That was as close as I would get.
Like
as goat
once
cheese.
every 6 months. No.
And so I did that for I think 18 months to 2 years, somewhere in there.
Same. Yeah.
The last 6 months, I kind of started to put sweet potato in because I couldn't stay awake throughout the day anymore. That's how restrictive I was eating. But when I got past that and I tried to put dairy back in to my life, I realized that I'm very, very intolerant.
Fair. Yep.
To dairy. So it was like, oh, I'm going to reintroduce this. Oh no. Yeah. You know
no,
what?
I'm not.
That's going to be a once a month or twice a month kind of food. Even like something like pizza or something, just it does not agree with my digestion. It will make me snore more, like all of these crazy things.
Yeah.
And it was just, I never would have realized that or made that connection if I hadn't completely cut dairy out for a while.
Totally.
But the restrictive thing, working with Anna because I do everything by grams usually, right? Like when I'm cutting. And so on this journey over the last couple of years, like cutting down body weight, cutting down and having those restrictive phases, I've noticed like even now I don't track super often, but I'm listening to my body more. And I'm able to know like when I'm feeling like good and full and like my body's giving me more signals. Because for a long time, like I could sit down and eat 20,000 calories and still feel hungry.
No, and that's a thing for me too that I've noticed is I don't understand the feeling of hunger or full very well. And I think part of that is probably just having done that to myself over time. I think the other part of it, which I noticed, I was messaging someone last night and also the night before, and they picked up on this trend with me. They're like, you kind of forgot to eat dinner twice. And I think that plays into the, like, I'm not big on labels with this stuff for my own sake, but like self-diagnosed ADHD, where I'll be like, oh, it's been a while. Like I need to eat food. And then I'm like, oh, but look at this thing over here. And oh, I want to do this. And honestly, for me, I think, and this probably relates more to the diabetic stuff, eating isn't that exciting anymore because it did. And maybe you can relate on the numbers. I'd like to hear your input from like how you get excited about food with you're still counting. Because for me, when it all becomes math and a possible negative consequence, right? Like if I don't plan this well and I don't eat the right thing at the right time. So like, for example, if I eat rice before bed, I know I'm going to spike overnight. Like I cannot eat rice before bed. And then it's all work. And so I think that's another part of it, but I honestly don't enjoy the act of eating. I get bored chewing food. So like, I'll just distract myself and forget to have a meal and I don't notice it. And so I think that's also where the scheduling is really important. And think for me, like if I have foods in my fridge that I have to fully prepare, I've noticed, especially in the last couple of years, they'll go bad and I just won't eat. And so like I buy the fruit platter instead of buying the, fruit that I'd have to cut because it's going to rot in my fridge. Whereas the fruit platter, I'll sit down and eat a bit every day for a couple of days. So finding those workarounds for me has been important because I don't get those signals. And when I do get those signals, it's actually really easy for me to override them.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you're saying like you find those little tricks, whatever works for you, right? Like, okay, you're not going to cut your fruit. So buy the pre-cut fruit, whatever works. Like I know if I buy fresh vegetables, 90% chance they are dying in my fridge. I buy frozen. So I can throw it in the microwave or a steamer and I'm done. And I don't have to break 100%. Off the broccoli from the head, the florets from the head. I don't have to do anything. I can just steam and go. Or I can throw it, like I do Brussels sprouts in the oven. I grab the frozen, throw them in the oven and bake them.
Oh, that is smart, because I hate cutting them.
Yeah. And then when I throw them in frozen, they get steamed at first as they're thawing, right, and they come out super soft. And then I'll do
life hack. Like put that on Pinterest, dude. Yeah.
Onion or bacon or something like that, depending on what I'm doing that day. Always like I'll throw that in there and I'll just toss it all up. And it's so simple, but awesome. So yeah, it's finding those little tricks, like you said, fruit platter. But it's the overriding of the signal thing. That's what I've been trying to relearn. And that's why I talk about it in the community, like teaching your kids to trust their body, to listen to their body. So they're not 37 and still trying to figure out how to feed their body, is probably going to have them have a healthier journey, like a more empowered journey in their lives. Because like for me, like going through those periods, living in my car, not knowing if I was going to eat in the next 3 days, it was like, okay, so hunger doesn't matter. I'm going to drink water. Yeah. And I'm just going to make my stomach feel full. And I got to just like suck it up. Right. I lost like 80 pounds in 3 months because I literally was not eating for the most part. And so like the counting, like I said, with the macros and getting the math into it, it does get a little boring sometimes, but it's also helping me realize, okay, like this is what a day worth of food for my body looks like. And for a long time, I would split it into 2 really big meals, but now I'm actually trying to break it because I hate making my meals most times, especially living alone for the most part. And I hate the process of eating. So I'm like, okay, if I can cram everything into 2 meals.
So you're like me, you don't enjoy eating either.
No, because it's because I'm still learning to trust my body. Like I am so scared that if I just eat intuitively, that I'm gonna gain back, another 80 pounds. And so that fear is like ever present. So like some of the days right now where I'm practicing like the intuitive eating on weekends. And so I will sometimes go an entire day and maybe have a sandwich because I'm scared if I just eat, I'm going to eat way too much. And then there's other days where I can just sit down. Okay, Arthur, think about your stomach. Okay, how does it feel? Okay, no, it's still pretty full. Okay. And then literally just like sitting there and being like, talking to myself like I'm a child and be like, okay, how does your tummy feel, Arthur? Is there room? Are you hungry? Are you just bored? Like, and just breaking down all these little steps. Yeah.
That's huge though. That I think that point you just made, like talking to yourself like a child, but it's because, and like no fault to parents because they always do the best they can. And I know my mom has done and does do the best she can and she's wonderful. But I think it really is. It's like the conversations I'm having with myself now about like how I'm feeling with like processing this trauma. It's similar with food. It's like those conversations I didn't have at that time. I need to be having them now. So it really is. It's like that check of like, how does my stomach feel? Am I just bored? I don't know if you've heard that HALT thing, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, to check in when you're like feeling upset or whatever, or reactive. But my mentor always said the first H is also for hydrate. So it's like hydrate and hungry. And then angry, lonely, tired, and like go through that checklist. And sometimes I think we really do, I do need to break it down to be that simple because these aren't things that I innately know. And maybe I did at one point, but I've done enough damage to myself that they have gone away, or maybe I never developed them. Like, I don't know. And so now it really is, it's a bit more of a intentional check-in to figure these things out, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And we always talk about parents, but you're right. Sometimes we do it to ourselves throughout our life, trying to, whatever we need to do, like we get that instant, like, okay, I need to survive this. Okay, what can I do to survive this? What can I do to tolerate this? What can I do to make it through to the other side? Because I don't want to die. And it's really cool as human beings, but like that, like you said, having those conversations, I do it for trauma too, different things that pop up and say, okay, breathe. Like yesterday, I was going into work and something that I thought was coming at 10 a.m. was coming at 10 a.m. Mountain, which means 9 a.m.
Right.
So now I'm like in a panic and I'm trying to drive and I'm like, okay, Arthur, breathe, turn off the radio, reduce your stimulation, breathe, just like the deep breaths. And I'm like, I'm going to get to work safe. I'm going to get to this place safe in time. Like, I don't need to rush. I don't need to get in an accident. If I'm late, oh, well, who cares? And just like talking to myself, like outside perspective.
Yep.
And I've done it twice before where I wasn't mindful of that and I wrote off 2 vehicles. So
it's a good note for me, the new driver over here, because I just got a car a couple months ago, and it's awesome. So true. I would be like coming up to a green light and be like panicked that it was going to go stale, which is ridiculous because, as you know, like if you get to a certain point and it turns yellow, you are still allowed to go. But as a new driver, and like especially at, this area, people listening to this might not, 152 and King George, where they intersect. Like
it's
a pretty big intersection. Like
it's like 6 lanes one way, 6 lanes another way. It's huge.
So it's far to cross. It's not like a little 1 lane each cross. And so especially coming up to that one, I always would panic that someone would turn and I get stuck in the middle and it's like a whole thing. So I'd like start going like 60, 65, and being a new driver, I probably shouldn't be going over like 55 in a 50 area. And then I'd slow down again once I got through. And so lately I've gotten better at like exactly that, like take the deep breath, be like, dude behind me can just fuck right off. Like, whatever, I'm going to go my regular speed. And I know the point of no return. It's like, I have this information. I know what I'm doing. It's okay. And, going with that, but it really is like breaking it down into those little steps. And like you said, don't forget to breathe, because I do that. Ask my driving instructor, ask my riding instructor. They have all had to remind me to breathe. It's the first thing to go for me, which is probably not a good general life response, but yeah.
I get it though, because I'm very prone to like hold my breath and it's like, okay, wait, something's missing. Oh, oxygen. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll gasp. And it would happen with my former partner when he'd be over and I'd be sitting on the couch and randomly I would like breathe, but then I would sigh really loud. And I think that's because I was like preparing to take another deep breath. And he'd kind of be like, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? And I was like, no, that I was just sighing. And he's like, are you sure? Like, what did I do? And I was like, no, it's nothing. Like and I would notice that would happen every so often. And I think it's because I get so wrapped up in something else or like so focused, or I'm holding stress maybe, and I just forget. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. At the point of no return too, that's when my dad kept saying, because I used to have a lot of anxiety around intersections. And he's like, look, as you're coming, just know when you can no longer stop.
Yep.
Once you're past that point, it does not matter what the light does.
You go.
Yellow, whatever, just keep going. Don't, because I used to like lock up my brakes and like skid up to the line trying to halt as fast as possible the moment that light would turn. Like I would just lock up the brakes and just like.
Yeah, no, I get that. My driving instructor was really good actually. For every time we would approach an intersection, he would say it. And so I would start saying it. And yeah, he had some good tricks, like also with checking intersections. He said the ones on the left are peds and the ones on the right are estrians. So you make sure you check both sides, and like little things like that have kind of stuck with me. So even still, when I'm driving on my own, I'll be like singing along to the radio, doing my thing, and then I'll be like, okay, point of no return, and then keep going. And of course, like looking for the countdown. But sometimes you miss that, right? Sometimes you can't see it, or no one triggered the thing, so it's not there. So you don't have that cue. So you really have to look at those other things. So yeah, the point of no return for me, that's a big one. But just don't panic after it either. Like, yeah.
No, exactly. Just trying to keep going through.
Yeah. So what's like, because you have a kid, and I think your current partner has kids, if you don't mind me commenting on that.
3, yep.
Okay. So what has your experience been like integrating these things you're learning actually with the littles, which obviously is not an experience I have. I mean, I have a cat who's very finicky about his food. I've grown up as that kid who like shoved her green beans into the paper towel roll in the middle of the table, and my mom didn't figure it out for like a week and was not very impressed. But yeah, how has it been kind of helping guide them in this regard?
Well, with my son, I was very compartmentalized because I would have him a couple times a month and then for holidays.
Okay.
So I was very, very mindful of how I interacted with food when he was around. Because I knew from, because I had looked into it, because I knew I had food issues when I found out that his mom was pregnant with him, right? And so I had looked into all of these things, like, okay, do not do these things and do not say these things, and like, do avoid this, do this, and all of these things when it came to children. So when he was around, I had this period of hyper focus around it.
Mm.
So for him, he's a very intuitive eater. I have to check in with him. His biggest thing is he doesn't realize he gets hungry. And he'll get sick if he doesn't eat.
Right.
Because he'll like not think about food until he's like, oh wow, okay, I'm dry heaving. Maybe I should have been eating. When was the last time I ate? It's been much better now, but when he was like younger, in his like that age 6 to 10ish, when he's rediscovering his own body again, he would get sick. And I had to think for myself. I'm like, okay, I know I'm not huge on eating a lot, but I'm like, okay, have you offered him food? When was the last time you offered him food? So that's kind of, because he's 16 now, so that's a bit of history. Right now, the focus with him is getting him cooking more. He was really good about it when he was like 10 to 12. And then there's been a bunch of different things for him that have changed.
Mm.
So he's not so much into it right now.
Fair.
For the tiny humans, with Sarah's children, it's been really good. Just working on little things like I did that one video on the Instagram account talking about the bedtime snack thing. Like, oh, you're putting them to bed and they're already laying down and then they're starving. And we just broke it down. We had a conversation right there. Okay, you're hungry. How does your tummy feel? Feels empty. And then we talked about it. They're like, okay, well, we had dinner and we had a snack and everything like normal. So what happened? Oh, I didn't want to eat very much because we had this and this and this going on, and it was all new and it was exciting, and I didn't really want to sit down to eat at that time, and kind of breaking it down. And we had a great conversation. Mm-hmm. And they all grabbed whatever they wanted. I think one had an apple and one had a slice of bread and one had pickles and whatever they were feeling. And it was like a great little thing. I mean, the other side of that is we could have fought it and said, oh no, you're not eating, you're in bed, and had like this 3-hour power struggle. Mm-hmm. When it would have just simply been breaking it down, having that conversation, be like, okay, check in with your body. Talk to me. How is your body feeling? So little journeys like that have happened in a few different times. And so it's been a really nice experience, because it's not just like, oh, okay, well, I've done this with my 16-year-old. It's like, this is still applicable and works for, 3 tiny humans as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that power struggle that you mentioned is a really big one that for me rings true of when I was a kid, because I think that comes into play like with that finish everything on your plate mentality too, and I think that's also from kind of an often like understandably so scarcity mindset around food, right? Like I am definitely one, I hate wasting food. And I don't think that's a bad value or whatever to have. It's when that overrides me listening to my body that it can become problematic on like a more personal level, not like a broader scale kind of level, right? So maybe I adjust my shopping list instead and like change my portion sizes so I don't waste it and like whatever. But I definitely remember that power struggle from when I was a kid. And like one time in particular, I remember wanting to I think I wanted a drink. Like, I don't think it was food, but I think I wanted either probably juice because we drank too much juice, or water. And I remember being at my bedroom door screaming with my dad sitting on the other side, not letting me out for like hours, trying to force me to stay in my room. Oh, wow. And of course, my what happened was eventually they let me out because my mom was like, you can't do this anymore. Like, let her out of there. And I came out and someone was breaking into our garage. So when we turned on the kitchen light, they drove off. And so I was like, see, you should have listened to me in the first place. But, I just remember that. And I honestly think there's probably more for me to unpack there. But when you say power struggle, like to me, that was a very clear power struggle of something that really didn't matter. Like, what's the big deal for a kid? I was probably like 6 or 7 years old to get out of bed, to have a small glass of water, probably not juice. Maybe that should have been an actual conversation because I'd already brushed my teeth and like whatever. Yeah. But why did that need to get fully shut down versus entertaining maybe an alternative option or planning ahead for the next night or whatever that looked like?
Yeah. I like the curious, not furious mindset, right? Like, because tiny humans, as you're growing up, like you don't understand why they don't even want you to. Like, it's just like no, and it's not. There's no like communication. There's just like a complete breakdown, and that power, like you said, it touches outside of food too. So like my focus in the group obviously is food, but that's my mentality around parenting or around children, period. It's like, these are tiny human beings. I know I still have issues in my day-to-day life where there's things I can't handle, and I've been on the earth 37 years. So these tiny beings, like, that are still growing and learning, of like, giving them love, empathy, and compassion. And my patience, because people are like, oh, you have so much patience. It's like, well, I just understand what it's like to be a kid. When I was growing up, like, I had so many adults that would be like, oh, it's this way because it's this way. And I was like, okay, but I never want to be that adult. Like, I want to remember that it's hard to be a kid, and you may not, like, I may not remember why it was hard, but I can totally remember being in those moments where I felt completely powerless, and all I wanted was a hug.
Yeah. You know, and I had an experience actually with my niece last weekend. She came over. We're actually meeting up today. I'm going to help her carve a pumpkin. I got roped into that one. And we went to the park because she was coming over, and I asked ahead because she likes to plan ahead. I said, do you want to go hula hoop? So she said yes. So she brought hers because I got it for her like years ago. I would go to the park, and she's like, but I don't know how. And I said, well, it's okay. Like, I'll teach you. Like, and so she decided she wanted to try because she saw me doing it. But the thing with hula hooping, it's not what a lot of people think, where you're moving your hips. You're actually using your stomach and like your abdominal a lot more. So when the hoop touches your stomach, you push your stomach out, and that's what keeps it going. So it's very much like a controlled breathing. And that in and out of your stomach pushes the hoop. So like, think, I mean, not quite that drastic, but the same motion you get in your stomach when you're inhaling before a squat, like that brace around your core, it's that same push out that pushes the hoop. So the thing, and when it falls lower, like, when it's on your hips, you do need to move your hips more because it's that resistance against it that keeps it going. But when it's above your hips, it's your stomach. So she's like ready to go. And I am like, okay, watch me first, and I'll show you slow motion. So I could just like move it around and show her. I was like, so when it gets here, make your belly really big. And as soon as I said that, she's like, I don't want to do it. And it broke my heart. And she couldn't verbalize it, but like my initial thought is she is 7 years old, and she is self-conscious of making her stomach look bigger. And that just like, I broke, like, it is so sad to me. And so I tried to have the conversation as much as I could. I was like, it's okay. Like, look, this is what I'm doing. This is how you do it. Like, it's okay. But you could tell she wasn't really ready to engage in the conversation. So I was like, it's okay if you don't want to too. Like, you can hang out with your toys. You can pick the song for like Auntie to hoop to. And like, so she ended up doing that and whatever. But just realizing like a 7-year-old can already have that internalized. And like, I have ideas of where some of it has come from. And I do try to give those people the feedback so that they can start to undo it. But like, that is already something that in a decade or 2 decades, she's going to have to work through. Like, it's already there, right? It can't just go away overnight for a 7-year-old.
No, wow. Just wow. But you're right. Like, it's not something she made up in her head. She's got the idea somewhere. That's like the whole mindset thing, why I keep going back to that language in the group, right? Is because that's number one. They watch, they listen. It doesn't even matter if you tell them about that themselves. They internalize whatever you're talking to yourself about as themselves. Like, they're just trying to mimic what they see. But wow, hopefully, that. But I mean, so I've got tons of stretch marks everywhere, all over my stomach, my arms, everything. And I can remember when I found those stretch marks. I was in grade 7, and I was getting changed to go into the gym. And I had been going through a chubbier phase, and it was upsetting me because I was constantly getting teased about like parts bouncing while I ran. And I had finally, like, I'd been crying myself to sleep every night. I finally came to a place of acceptance. Like, okay, I can't keep crying about this. This is my body, like going through unpacking all of that. Right. And then that was like between 6th and 7th grade. I was unpacking that and like trying to be like, okay, like it's my body. I got to love my body. It's the only body I got. And then when I went, so grade 7, I'm in gym class. I'm getting ready to go out to play basketball. And I take off my shirt and someone's like, oh, what did that? Did you fall in the mud? And I hadn't realized that within the last few days, I had developed stretch marks on my abdomen. And they're quite crimson. They're very stark contrast to my pale white belly. And I sat down and I bawled.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like that was so much. Like, where did that even come from? Why was that a big deal to me in 7th grade about my body? Like, why did I even hold those views about my own body? Why was it like, I don't understand now why it was an issue. I just remember like sitting down and like bawling and like, oh my God, my body's betrayed me again. I finally accepted that I'm fat and now I've got stretch marks everywhere. They're still going to tease me. I can't win. Like all this self-defeating, like, and I honestly couldn't tell you where I got that from. But I know it was very real in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too,
I mean, it's everywhere, right? Like, it's just like, my former partner actually said to me once, with me being sober and us having those kinds of conversations. And he commented, he's like, how do you do this? Alcohol is everywhere. And it is so normalized. Like every celebration, every sad moment, being a parent, because apparently that's how you're supposed to cope at the end of the day. And like liquor stores on every corner. And now it's in the grocery store. And it's like, it is actually everywhere. And it's made out to be a good choice in a lot of situations. And I mean like marketing, but still, like parts of celebrations. And I think it's similar with this, is that those narratives that we internalize, as much as we maybe don't realize it, they are everywhere in marketing, in the clothing we see, in the sizes and the cuts and the things, and the people at the gym who are the ones choosing to show off their bodies a bit more. Well, what do those people look like? Right. And how much time do they actually have to dedicate to that the rest of us don't, or whatever it is. And like, there's so many factors, but that message is everywhere. So I feel like it's one of those things where even if someone hadn't told you that, there's already an internalized narrative just from what we're observing. And especially as kids that we might not be like aware of, but it doesn't make it, like you said, it doesn't make it less real.
Yeah. No, not less real at all. And that's why I keep bringing it back to mindset. And really like my whole focus from my parenting journey and interacting with children to this community growing to support families and their children with nutrition. It's all being the adult I needed as a child.
Yes.
And like, so all of these moments, these memories that I've consciously held on to, not to like punish or beat myself up, but so I have that awareness to support children. Like that's been, I mean, my first, like the Write Your Future stories you start doing in like grade 6-ish. They always had families. Some of them really unrealistic. Like I think the one I wrote, I was 21 with 4 kids.
I mean, in the 60s maybe, but
but it was just like these, like for whatever reason, I wanted that family. And I think a lot of it was to be the parent that I didn't have. And I love my parents. My father's passed now at the beginning of the year. My mom's still around. I love her dearly. Like I'm not talking anything bad about them.
For sure.
Because they did the best with what they had.
Yeah.
And I think some people, like when you talk about, oh, like, I wish my parents would have done this. They're like, oh, well, your parents did the best they did. Yeah, totally. Like, I'm not saying they didn't. I just am acknowledging the fact that there's a different path that may lead to brighter futures or different futures. And it's not about like that good, bad, right or wrong morality shit. It's just literally, that's what calls to me. That's what has me feeling centered and whole as a human being. So Yeah,
Oh,
but
I love that. And I think, like you said, like you can learn from what you didn't get that maybe you needed, or what you got that you didn't need, without
yeah,
that being a judgment of whether they did things right or wrong. And I think that's
yeah,
really important for sure. And at the end of the day, I guess the thought that just came up for me as you were saying that is like, these humans raised you, and they raised you to be this person who is now able to recognize these patterns and seek out the resources you need to heal yourself. So
exactly.
even if some of the things they did are some of those, impacted and are the things you're now working to heal, they still raise you to be the person who can do that. And that's huge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, maybe I don't want to say your kids get messed up. It's not like that, but it's like, I've had someone say to me before, and actually another episode on here where we talked about body respect. So kind of a related topic to this. And that was one thing I had said to her, because she was so worried about like, my kids are going to need therapy. I said it kind of jokingly. I was like, yeah, but at the end of the day, if you raise kids who are willing and able to seek out therapy and that support when they need it,
Yeah.
you win.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about like bringing it back to keep that curious mindset, that natural curiosity, and that desire to learn more, do more. Like that's one thing in my head that I kept from my dad was he's like, look, Art, he's like, learn something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I believe we can learn something, at least one thing every single day. And he's like, the last thing we learn is how to die.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like, that is powerful. That is really powerful.
Yeah,
I don't know. As you said that, I just got, and I don't know anything about your parents aside from what you're telling me right now, but as you shared that, and I've been on my own like witchy empath journey with learning this stuff, but I feel like I got a feeling of who he is. I don't want to say is. And just that feeling of like safety and comfort that it feels like he brought forward. I don't know if that resonates, but that's what I felt as you shared that. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he definitely had that aura.
Yeah.
At times throughout his journey anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. But no, I think that's amazing. And that curiosity is huge. And I am definitely like that. By the way, it's totally okay to cry on this channel. I have done it a couple of times already. We swear, we cry, all of it is just out there. That's what happens in like real conversations with friends, which is what this is. So totally okay. I am the curious person. I ask so many questions all the time. It drives my bosses nuts, wild. I'm trying not to use that word. But at the same time, it's like, I want to be responsible for my learning, right? In any situation. And so I think that's, with the food and the restrictive diets, like that is in a sense, as much as it felt regimented and like necessary, it's curiosity driven. Cause it's like, well, what happens if I take this out? How do I feel? What does that response tell me? Oh, there's no response. What can I learn from that? And it kind of takes you down that rabbit hole. But in a really, at least for me, it's been a really amazing way with lots of ebbs and flows. But yeah.
And like you said, pulling it in and out, and it brought to mind for me like pulling morality out, because I think when we pull morality out of food, it's so much easier to just like listen to our bodies. When we've got our mind going off, oh, I'm bad, oh, I'm good, I shouldn't eat this, I need to eat this, otherwise I'm a terrible human being. Like, as long as you've got that noise bouncing around in your head, actually taking a bite and enjoying a meal and checking in with your body is so much harder, because you've got like this cacophony going off in your mind telling you all these millions of points of data that are completely irrelevant.
Oh, for sure. I think that's something I posted right when Anna went live in your group. And that hit me hard when I heard, I think it was Steph Godreau who said it, from previously Stupid Easy Paleo, now Steph Godreau, and doing a bit of a different thing. I think it was her who said, food does not carry any moral value. And I've said that to people who have been talking to me, like, I need to eat cleaner or whatever. And I say that, and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, sit on it for a bit, see what happens. And that's another thing that I despise, is when we say I need to eat clean, or I eat clean foods. It's like, as opposed to dirty, like, I wash my apple too. Like, that's a new thing since COVID for me. Before that, I didn't really care. But there's no clean dirty. It's like, what is the way that I try to think about it is like, what is the most healthful and supportive for me in terms of, yeah, like dietary needs, but also mental, emotional right now. And so some days that might be still gluten-free because of my things, frozen pizza. Yeah. Other days I legitimately will eat 2 pounds of ground beef with salsa mixed in, and that's my dinner. And other days it might be a more like well-rounded meal on a plate that probably means my mother cooked for me. So it's just, feeling, or like tub of gelato that's in my freezer right now. And it really, it depends. It's like a lawyer always says, you ask them a question, well, it depends. And it's true. Yeah. It depends. And I think it's getting to the point where we and like the little humans can learn for ourselves how to interpret the situations where it depends and make the best decision for us in the moment that we can.
Exactly. And understanding, like breaking down, why do we even eat? Like we're trying to fuel our bodies. We got to get in what our bodies need. But like remembering, like you said, that mental side. And that's like when I share, like, that's why I've been sharing more and around serving dessert with dinner, putting it on the same plate, taking sugar down off of a pedestal. So like not using it for not a reward.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not a reward. You don't have to eat all your food to earn dessert. Like I understand the mentality that had that happen, because dessert is energy dense. And so like originally it was like, okay, well, you had your meal. We know you've got all the vegetables you need and all of that. This is energy dense. So if you're like, you're still growing, you still need energy. Okay, here's something super energy dense. Because they used to like make them in these like little like mug cakes, like pans, like on the edge of fires and stuff, right? Like it was literally like the first cakes. It was just because they were trying to get a bunch of calories, like a bunch of energy into something compact and a little bit sweet and a little nice, just to get it in. And it made it more palatable. It made the shelf life a little bit better. Like,
right.
They were just trying to get this energy dense for all their field work and farmers and everything else like that. Like, so I understand like the mentality, it just doesn't serve us anymore to do it that way. If you're going to serve dessert, put it on the same plate. Maybe as a parent, okay, well, I'm only going to give them selection of meat and vegetables or a protein source and vegetables. I'm really trying to switch to protein source versus meat. I very much love meat, but I understand not everyone does. And I'm trying to be inclusive in that area.
It's a tough one. Yeah. I say, I guess often the word I use isn't meat. I normally say animal protein.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I agree. You want to branch out to non-animal proteins as well. That's where for me, I get like, but a lot of them are more inflammatory. So for me, that's not ideal. For some people, it works and you get to learn how to figure that out.
Yeah, I tried doing a lot of the soy stuff. It did not agree with my body.
And monocrops, if we want to talk ethics. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, there's a whole, that's what I mean. That whole, I don't want to really get into that because there's a whole.
That's enough of a statement. People can Google.
Yeah, they can Google, corn, they can look into.
Quinoa, look it up. Yeah.
But so that's why I'm just trying to say protein source, because it could be legumes as well. Some people prefer to get their protein from legumes. Cool, whatever. If not inflammatory for you, cool.
Yep.
Whatever works.
Soak them first.
Yeah. But so maybe as a parent, you're giving them a selection of vegetables and a protein source and then desserts on the plate. You still give them everything, including the rice or potatoes or whatever starches you were going to offer anyway. You got to kind of base it off your child and how active they are and their energy needs, right? Like it's all about helping them meet their energy needs. That's it. Like super freaking basic. They're not good or bad because they won't eat or they do eat something. Like it's even like parents that celebrate the vegetables, celebrate it on the inside. Because otherwise we're imparting morality onto a food again. We're saying they are good boys or girls for eating their vegetables. Now they're good. So now they're not eating it because they're listening to their body and nourishing their body. They're eating it because they want to be good. And it just, these are all just little things that just like keep disconnected instead of just, okay, connected to food as fuel, nourishing my body. And it's a great like reminder for myself.
No, I appreciate you sharing that because actually I've gotten some weird comments before about how I eat. And granted, I could work to put all the food on one plate, but I'm a single lady. I live alone. That's not always how it goes. And you don't want to see the state of my kitchen right now. But I'll eat, like, for example, the nights where, so, like yesterday, I had an animal protein source at lunch, but minimal. And then at night, I realized that I was an idiot. I'll say this about myself. And the day before, when I got my groceries, I FIFO'd my protein. So I took it out of the freezer and then put the rest in the freezer. But that meant last night, none of it was thawed. So I ate a can of beans for my protein. Thing is, that's also very high in carbohydrate. So,
2 to 1. It's about 2 to 1.
Yeah. So not ideal when I strictly know that I need protein. So the thing is, today I'll be eating more, but I balance out like that. Like you're talking about, like, supplement the starch with another carb, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if I have like the pound of pork with whatever I put in it, sometimes I'll add beans to it, and then that's also some carbohydrate. But then those might be the nights where after I eat that bowl of meat, I'm then having a bowl of yogurt and granola and berries, and getting like some fiber and more carb, but it's also a bit sweet. So it kind of, for me, that's how I balance things. And that's where it becomes a little bit more intuitive. And I really just, in terms of priority for me, has been the protein is the main thing I stay mindful of. I'm trying to get at least a serving of vegetable, like a good serving of vegetables a day. And as much as possible, I just make sure that those are green. And then whatever else comes into play is great, and it's a bonus. But if I can get that baseline, like that for me is what I consider like not success in terms of like I did a good job, but just like what I know I need to feel good going through the day, like enough energy, enough whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's it. It doesn't, like, people have all these crazy opinions about so many things in life. And it's like, one, we're not asking you to do what we're doing. So if it doesn't work for you, cool, just don't pick it up. Not a big deal. Not advocating this is the premier and only way to eat in the world. Like, but it's so like I've often done like, a pound of beef with 2 cups of peas or something, or salsa. Salsa's so handy. I mean, everything's already chopped and it's in a tub and you can just dump it on
and it's
top.
vegetables.
It's vegetables. But like whatever it takes. And like same with the vegetable level, like some people get really stressed out about getting like enough of each vegetable every single day. And it's like, no, like that's micro. Look at macro. Step out. And over the course of a couple weeks, if you get a variety of fruits and vegetables, it's no big deal. Like when it comes to all the minerals and all of the like the nourishing elements in the fruits and the vegetables that we eat, our body has stores for that. It's not like you bring in 1 gram of magnesium and it's used instantly and it goes back out. Your body keeps stores of your magnesium and your calcium and all those other things in the body. So as long as you're getting them in your diet at some point on the macro level, it's not so big that, if you go through a day and all you eat is a bunch of meat and a fiber bar, whatever. Like,
well, and my thought too is if you're someone like I noticed at a certain point I was eating no vegetables in the day. And if you're someone who's going from eating no vegetables, it's probably not going to work for you to try to incorporate a variety of vegetables every single day at every meal. So that's why for me, my first step was I'm going to eat leafy greens once a day, or some sort of like more fibrous green vegetable like asparagus or whatever. And so I actually, if we're talking like how I make this happen for myself, I buy the pre-bagged salads. Like, that kale salad with the sesame dressing or whatever.
That's like my favorite one.
So that I have 6 of them in my fridge right now. Often I'll actually eat the whole family size one. For me is like one sitting. But that's like a good amount of vegetables. But for me, that's what I mean when I say I get like 1 vegetables a day. That's my 1 vegetables. And so to me, that's quite substantial. And so I just try to incorporate it that way. It's like, if that's the only time I'm going to be eating them, I'll make that one the best that it can be for me, like nutrient wise. Also something I enjoy eating, because otherwise it's not happening. And, and go from there. So if I'm eating my like keto good fat bar for breakfast, whatever. I don't need to have a savory breakfast, and we don't work well together. If I do that, I get hungry 10 minutes later. If I have, which is very counterintuitive to what a lot of people share about. They're like, have a savory breakfast. It sets up your day. If I do that, I'll be eating in an hour. But if I have this bar for whatever reason, I'll be full until like 1 p.m. from 6:30 in the morning. So
it's just, listening to myself versus what other people are saying. Like you said, like there's a way that works for everyone, and you kind of at a certain point you got to just figure that out for you. Yeah.
There's so much like zealotry in around nutrition that it's like, oh, this is the only way in the world that anyone should eat. No, that's not the way human beings work.
Yeah.
Like, it's not how we developed. It's not how we evolved. We have this variety that we incorporate.
Well, yeah,
all
I think
individual beings.
some things may be more optimal, but bio-individuality. Like I always kind of take it back to that. Yeah. And so it's that balance. But I did have a question for you as we're kind of, I want to be mindful of time here, but one thing I did want to come back to ask that I feel is a good, like kind of punch at the end of this conversation. Cause you'd mentioned like the things to say and not to say around kids. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to share like more like a practical level, like maybe your top 1 to 2 on either end of that, that you try to engage in or really try actively not to engage in.
So like keeping it just to the nutrition side of things. So a couple of things that I consciously avoid: commenting on what they do or don't eat off of their plate. So if they only ate the meat or they only ate the carrots or whatever, not saying like, oh, you only ate carrots. And instead of that, it's flip it back. Okay, how's your tummy feeling? Are you full? If they say no, then say, okay, well, what can we do on the plate, right? So avoiding commenting on whatever they do or don't eat. That's the number 1. And 2, it's more commenting on myself, but it's around them, and it's never commenting on my body. Never, I feel fat or I'm too skinny or anything. And when it comes to remarks about body, period, I switch it, and I'll switch it to the other side, and I'll make it about an ability. Like, oh, you picked that up, you're so strong. Or, oh, look at that, isn't it nice that you can fall and not hurt yourself? Our bodies sure are cool. Or whatever it has to be that does not talk about size or anything like that, right? And it's being focused on myself, to not say it about myself, because I know not to say it to children, but if I'm going to say it about anybody, it's going to be me.
Yeah.
And so being super mindful about that. That's the 2, like avoid, do not. And then 2 is just the curious. That's really the number 1 thing, is get curious. So asking is the number 1 tip, honestly, as a parent in any realm relating to a tiny human or to your own body. Curious. Get curious, ask questions, number 1. And that's all that's bouncing around in my head right now. But
no, I think that is super helpful. And that reminds me too, like if we're going more on the fitness end of the spectrum, whenever I see people online commenting about whatever it is, they're like, I want to lose weight or this and this or blah, blah, blah. And, that's my goal. What should I do? And my response is always, what movement pattern excites you? Like pick a movement pattern, focus on getting to that point, and the rest of that, whether it is that your body actually changes or it's just that your thoughts about your body changes, will probably follow. And so taking it, off of this focus and more like, what can we do? How can I engage with my body in a way that feels supportive? I don't want to say good, like supportive for me. And I think that's really, I like that idea around the food as well, like taking the moral value out of the conversations and being really mindful of that. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And that's really the biggest thing. Like you said, the morality out of it. Movement wise too. It's like, what do you want to do? What can you consistently do? Like you said, what excites you? These are all great things. Not, oh, what's the best exercise to get big arms, or what's the best exercise to tone my belly, or it's, what do you like to do? That's it.
I remember actually when you mentioned that, it brought this up. When I was shopping for a dress and I had tried on 2, and one of them was like closed in the back and it fit. But at the time I hadn't been, and I still haven't been, lifting weights. And I know as soon as I start lifting, like my shoulders get like jacked. Like there's no walking around that topic. Like it's very evident, like very quickly.
And I still haven't gone back, but I do plan to. And so I made a comment at that time that I didn't think it was a good idea because if I start lifting weights again, my arms will get bigger. And the person selling me this dress was like, no, don't get bigger. You're great the way you are. So I did choose the other dress that had a bit more space, spaghetti straps, and a fully open back so that, you know, there's room for me to move and build muscle or whatever I build. It's there, it's fine. But that comment, and I know she didn't mean it in the way that it definitely is perceived. But I also am glad to be at a point where I'm okay with the fact that like I was buying a jacket. I was looking at a jacket the other day and I tried it on and it fit, but it was snug in the shoulders. And my friend was like, oh, well, it works. I was like, yeah, but as soon as I start lifting weights, this isn't going to fit me. So like, I can't buy this size. But like, that's okay. Cause when I go back to that movement as well, and, you know, my body will change and I'm working on some mental stuff around that right now. Cause it's been a while. So it's still an adjustment, but it is a shift that I can be okay with and I want to prepare for. And so like, yeah, comments like that, I think being aware when we say things, because that person probably didn't realize how that comes across. And like also grateful that I was at a point where I was able to be like, actually, no, that's not going to work for me, but this one does. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to share that just came to mind when you were talking about that, for a long time, because I've always been a bigger individual, it's always been super easy for me to put on weight. I was stuck in that whole mindset of smaller is better, even for men, right? Like slimmer is better. And so I shared that with a friend and I was like, oh man, you're so skinny. And he broke down, he started crying. And he's like, man, he's like, I wish I could put on weight. He's like, I want nothing more than to be bigger like you. He's like, I can't figure it out because it feels like I'm eating 24/7 and I stay this size. And there was nothing wrong. Like his size to me was ideal. And I didn't realize that I was like being insensitive. And I didn't like have that realization that there are people who are small who don't want to be small and they just can't figure out a way around it too, right? And it really shed a lot more light for me around the whole like somebody else's body is none of my business. I really don't need to talk about bodies, period.
I got chills. Yeah. You know what? I actually, before this call, had a moment where I made a comment like that to someone by accident, like just this morning.
Yeah.
I think coming from a place, I hadn't seen this person in person for like 5 years and they sent me a picture and I was like, oh my God, you're tiny. Like just, I should not have said that. And I caught myself right away. I was like, sorry, I shouldn't be commenting on that. Like, I think it came from a place of not having seen you in a while. And they're like, no, it's fine. But then the thing that they did share was like, I honestly think it's because I'm working a lot and I'm so busy that I'm not snacking and all these things. But I think, you know, that's the first step is having those conversations and being able to recognize when like, oh, I do engage in that behavior. And then we can start to step back from it and kind of rewrite that script for ourselves.
Exactly. That mindfulness, that awareness, like you said, you caught yourself right away. It's not a typical thing that you would comment on, but you had that awareness. Oh my God, this is what I just said. And you unpacked it in the moment and whatever. We're human beings. Conversations are messy.
Yeah. I always say human beings. Human beings.
Human beings?
Yeah. Because often when people say beings, it sounds like human beings. So I just started saying human beings.
That works. Yeah.
Which, given the topic of this conversation, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, it's true. And it really is like in all regards, this relationship with food and with our bodies, thinking of it as a narrative, right? Like, well, we had to live moment to moment writing the story up to this point. It's not going to make sense if you turn the page and it's a totally different script. So like, it's going to take time to get, you know, to build that transition to that next chapter and what that looks like. And it's gradual and like, that is okay. And like with the little ones, that's okay too. And some of these tools that you're sharing and that you share in your group, which I'll be linking under this video, are ways I think that we can kind of like give them agency over that story a bit sooner and like give them that like favorite sparkly pen to like write the narrative they want versus the one that we've learned and internalized over the years.
Exactly. Right. Like the whole, like break the cycle, learn better, do better. There's a bunch of different ideologies around that. And it's just like you said, it's like empowering that being, that human being,
The little beans. Yeah.
yeah, the little beings, to have that awareness, to be mindful, to listen to their bodies and not make it about, oh, well, you got to eat this, you got to eat that. It's like, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to find, I read studies a couple of years ago, and they went out and they took a group of like 12 kids that all had different dietary issues, like digestively, and they equipped a kitchen with all of the fruits and vegetables and different packaged foods. And they're like, just eat whatever you want, however much you want. We're not going to tell you when to eat, what to eat, how to eat.
Interesting.
And the overall outcome is they came out with without any digestive issues.
Huh.
One of them, there was a little boy, and he, like, most of the time he was in there, he ate nothing but pickles. But it had healed his gut flora with all the fermented vegetables. And so I can't remember I got to find the study again.
That is fascinating.
I haven't been able to find it. It's so fascinating and so relevant. And it's literally, they took these children that were having different dietary issues and allowed them to self-regulate without adult like they would watch to make sure no one hurt themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just literally would pick what they wanted to eat.
Yeah.
And their bodies healed.
That is so fascinating.
And so that's why that gave me more freedom in letting kids pick trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's I think now, years later, that we as grown-ups are learning how to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So much of my work in the last year has been learning to trust myself.
Oh God, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation. That's a big one.
Yeah. That's a big conversation, but it's been life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm in it right now. Also, as always, Christoph came for his cameo.
Oh, hi, Christoph.
The famous one. He's the one everyone loves more than me. I'm not going to lie. People message me. They're like, I'm going to be honest. I miss your cat. I was like, it's fine. You can come see him. Like, yeah.
At least they're honest about it.
It's true. I appreciate that. Yeah. But no, I love that. And I appreciate everything you shared and your vulnerability, because I know it's a big topic for a lot of people. And I really appreciate that you're holding the space online as well, which, like I'll mention, I'll link under all of this, because that's been, even without kids, that's been a really great place to engage for me in these conversations and to learn what I did internalize growing up and to be able to pinpoint that so I can make the changes like you've been doing over the last few years. So.
Yeah. And it's like you said, adults get benefits out of it too. It's just the focus is how to talk to our children about it. So
and our inner children.
Inner children too. Exactly. We've all got our inner children. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time for today. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity to just sit down and chat, and I missed our conversation, so it's nice to get reconnected.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Coffee Time. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if today's show resonated, I invite you to drop into the comment section and share whatever personal introspection came up for you today. Anything you can do to help make the show more accessible is super duper appreciated. Until next time, I am your host and coffee drinking companion, Natalie, wishing you a beautifully caffeinated day.